Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Matthew. The paper wasn't my idea, but it was quite an entrance. Thank you. The tune was my idea, though. So you guys don't know me, but I know some of you. It's a great honour for me to be here speaking and sharing some of my ideas with some of you. I hope there's going to be some value in this for you today. There's unlikely to be time for a Q&A because I'm likely to talk right to the end. I decided when I heard there was going to be a piper that I was going to use the word privileged as well, but I thought I can't use the word privileged. It's been abused and hammered, hasn't it? You can't use privilege anymore. It's a bad word. When I was asked what song I wanted the piper to bring me in on, first time I've ever been piped in anywhere, by the way, that was quite an honour for me. It had to be Auld Lang Syne. Everyone familiar with that track? Yeah, because that opening line, should old acquaintance be forgot and never brought to mind? It's a question. And obviously if you ask feminists and their allies, the answer would be yes. We should forget our sacrificial acquaintances of the past. But the other reason I wanted to choose that song is because I've got bold ambitions for this talk today, because the thing that it is used to symbolize is a new year. And I would really like to kick off a new year in your understanding and perception of men and masculinity, who have really been, bold ambition I know, well, let's see how we get on. Because men are pretty beleaguered out there in the world, and when I'm working with men, they are walking around with shame and embarrassment for being men. They're being judged for the deeds of men long dead and distant, and that's just the older men. The younger men are growing up terrified of their masculinity, terrified of it moving through them, terrified of being perceived to be men, and doing as much as they can to kind of not identify with that in numerous distorted ways. And what I'll be sharing with you today is the Toltec perspective on masculinity and men that I've been working with for, as you said, been working with it for over 20 years, teaching for 10. And I've been scratching my head on the subject of gender and role models for 30 years since I noticed issues with the men in my life and heritage. And I must admit that I find that I had to heal quite a wound about men and masculinity in my life over the trusting of men and of the seeing the good in them because of the issues of my past. And I think it's what we're seeing in feminism today, we're also seeing in the men's movement, and I think it's something we have to be very wary of, and that is that when we have personal wounds that we are angry and pained over, that we react unfairly against people who weren't the perpetrators of those wounds. Because one thing that's very, very important to me is that, well, for starters, we're in the middle of a gender crisis. Forget the politics, forget the wars, forget everything else. The gender crisis, to me, is the most significant issue mankind is facing. Because unless men and women can have a positive, progressive, mutually powerful and celebratory future with each other, then to me, what's the point? I'm not interested in technology. I'm not interested in, hanging about in buildings, having what I consider to be mental masturbation conversations. I'm really not interested. Until men and women can be allies again, friends, enjoy each other's company, enjoy what each other offers, enjoy their unique gifts, then to me there isn't much hope. And the work that I hope to share with you today, and in the future, if some of you wish to work with me, which I'm, partly why I'm here as well, is that I would seek to offer my services to you, and seek to hear what you are doing as well, because I feel like men are 150 years behind women in learning how to work together again, and learning what brotherhood actually is, I hear women talk about sisterhood all the time, and it sounds like they mean it. But when I hear men calling each other brother, it feels hollow in my ears, like whether they are not sure whether they mean it or not. And when I've worked in men's groups and with men, they seem to be afraid of being outed as being boys or frauds or addicts or for their sexual capacity. And it makes it difficult for them to trust each other. And what I've found, though, is that the fruits of us going through that work together are well worth it. For me, the brotherhood of men is got to be one of the first things that we bring back as we seek to bring change in the world and swing the pendulum the other way. because it's pretty messy out there. How many of you were told you live in a patriarchy? Okay, me too. Me too. I've been speaking about the myth of patriarchy for 10 years. The talk was called Myth of Patriarchy. You can imagine how popular that was when it was on. Not very. But I used my entry into that, some peculiarities in our culture. So as a man, there are certain places I cannot go unless I wear certain garments. I can literally be stopped at the door unless I'm wearing certain clothes. Now, I'm wearing one example today. It's not the traditional normal form you'll see, but I'm wearing a shirt. I'm referring to the shirt here. And I just want to draw your attention to the shirt as a garment for a moment. And I want to identify some of the components of it. So what's this part here around my neck called? A collar. Yeah, that's right. What's the part around the wrists called? No, here. Cuffs. Okay, and what do I wear in the collar? A tie. So who else wears a collar and cuffs? Prisoners. Do you know of any context in our language, any context where a collar around the neck and cuffs around the wrists mean anything else? Anyone? Okay. Just because the material has changed, it doesn't change what they are symbols of. And we live in a graded collar system, blue collar, white collar, dog collar. All the police are known by their collar number, and that is across the developed world, and it is only the men who are collared. How can that be a patriarchy? How? It's not a conspiracy, it's an observable fact. And it's an observable fact that none of you know the roots of the collaring of the men. None of you. There's academics in here. There's studied people. None of you know. What's going on here? It's been staring you in your face your whole life. It cannot be a patriarchy under those grounds. Now, I'm not saying women don't have issues that have validity, but gender work it's like a road. There's two lanes in that road. And to talk about the issues of one lane, i.e. men's issues, doesn't take away, belittle or denigrate at all women's issues. It's like, here, none of the issues we're talking about here, none of them take away from the validity of women's issues at all, do they? And yet, why would there be women who would seek to prevent us meeting like this? Why do we have to keep the venue secret? This is an insanity. I mean, for me, how can we trust a logic that allows people to be judged for the deeds of others? How can we trust the minds that espouse such a position that you can judge somebody for the colour of their skin or their sex in this day and age, and yet they cry sexism and bigotry when they're being sexist and bigots? And the fact that they cannot see it, to me, it's a genuine question. How can we trust these people? How can they be given positions of authority or influence over campuses or state or the judiciary or the medical establishment? How? This is insane. And I really appreciate what Karen was saying earlier about women needing to rally around to deal with the issues of feminism. I completely agree. But men cannot sit on the sidelines while that's going on. Men have to rise to the challenge of our times in more ways than one. And for us, it means the reinvention and a rediscovery of what masculinity is, because that is a big men's issue. Excuse me a second, I need a drink. Do not cross this line. I'm going to remember that about some of the things I was going to say today. Do not cross this line. So yeah, men have really got a lot of work to do here, because one of the things I've learned, so in the Toltec tradition, boys become men, and the meaning of masculinity is found not in the safe spaces of the kitchen and the bedroom and the living room, but at the edge, where it's not safe. That's where masculinity is found to blossom and bloom. Now, in this day and age, it's no longer facing the teeth in the night at the edge of the village, which is why I think so many men no longer know where they can hone their skills. It's like one of the prime examples of gynocentrism in that respect is to say, oh, you cruel men saying boys shouldn't cry. Come to mummy and cry. Come on, you cruel men. And it's like, It's not at home that boys aren't supposed to cry. It's when they're at the edge, facing the teeth in the night, with the screams of their brothers beside them and the uncertainty of what's ahead. That's where honing one's emotions into a useful substance comes into its own. That's where masculinity is for, at the edge. And the edge has moved. And because men no longer know where the edge is, they don't know where to go. They don't know where to go. So they're milling around in all the safe spaces that have been created, going, how can I prove my man? Because everybody's doing the same thing. We're all doing the same jobs. Garments aren't actually gendered. I'm wearing a skirt. You know what I mean? I don't understand how people think that garments and face paint are gendered. You look around the world, native traditions everywhere, natives all over the world. Men wear frocks and face paint. Why? We're deluded thinking these are gendered items. They're just not. It's really confusing. There's real gender confusion going on, and one of the things I seek to do is to bring clarity to that so that we can return to a fertile masculinity. A fertile masculinity that's interested in reconnecting with women. Because I think one of the problems we're dealing with in this day and age is that generally heterosexual men have been avoiding getting involved in all the gender stuff because they're kind of afraid of having because it's like the measure of a man these days is either his sexual capacity or how well he can handle anger. And that's it. And these are the things that always get outed. And I think men are afraid of speaking out because that's what's going to be highlighted about them, as if that was the measure of a man. So it means that for the last sort of generation and a bit, the gender work has been led by the LGBT community. And this is because these have been, these are people who've been genuinely challenging stereotypes of the past, genuinely exploring the nuances of gender within, but the reality is their position is skewed to their perspective. And if we remember when Freud first began with psychology, he made all sorts of claims and statements that later psychologists turned around and said, well, all of those were taken from working with people who had a particular perspective. In that case, they weren't mentally well in that case. And they're like, you can't apply that to everybody because it doesn't apply. And gender is no different. There's great work come out of the LGBT community in recent years. There's loads of great fruits in there. But to project it onto the rest of the population, while heterosexual men are hiding in case their sexual capacity gets outed, is no future for men and women. There's no future there for how men and women can get over the hurdles and the judgments of the past and move towards a joyous and progressive, passionate celebration of each other that they can then pass on to their children. And that's what I mean by native gender. That's what I mean by our connection with our ancestors that I'll be talking about today. But first of all, I need to explain what the Toltec perspective on gender actually is, so you can understand what it is. Because it's not behaviors, it's not garments, it's not body bits. Okay, your body bits are your sex, but that's not gender. And that's why the youth of today and the LGBT community have been absolutely accurate in highlighting there is a fluidity and a spectrum within gender. But the definition of gender in the Toltec tradition, which I've integrated into Western language, and what you'll find as I talk today, is that we have a perfect gender language already. We don't need to reinvent new terms. And it is, in fact, the language of electromagnetism. It's electromagnetism. Okay? The masculine is the electrical, and the feminine is the magnetic. Okay? So women, that's why you have to deal with what you have to deal with, because you have to deal with the energy of being magnetic. Guys, you have to deal with the energy of charge and discharge. Okay, but now all of us have both. Women carry charge, men carry magnetism. We all have both within us. Getting the balance between them is the art form. And our culture is set up for the spasmic discharge of masculine energy so that men will not become skillful with it. Remember, the men are collared and cuffed. Because men who can take charge of the energy moving through them are a force to be reckoned with. And if you seek to divide and conquer and how to turn the peons on each other, you can't be having that going on. So, what happens within all of us is, I don't have time to elaborate too much on the details of that, but one of the things about charge that moves through all of us is it's always for change. It's always for change. So actually, If you think about all of the emotions that bubble up in you when you look at the issues in the world, anger, frustration, outrage, sadness, these are all an expression of the desire for it to be different. I wish it was different. I wish kids weren't getting fucked. I wish people weren't getting bombed. I wish there was more money in the bank. I wish there was more people at this conference. I'm not too sad about that. These are good numbers. But the thing is, all of these are actually masculine because they are the desire for change. And we don't understand what it is to temper and take charge of these energies so that we can be actual useful agents of that that's moving through us. Because the work I do is about gender mastery. And what do I mean by mastery? Well, I'll give you an example. So every one of you, that was my ringtone there as well. I was thinking, that can't be mine, surely not. I was like looking down there. Thank you, okay. So every one of you was born as a baby, lying on the mat, a product of male and female interaction. Every one of you, all animals. And you were lying there, kicking and lashing your arms and legs, filling your nappy, because you had no control of your bladder, or your arms, or your bowels. None of you. You would claw your mother when you were trying to caress her. It took you about a year to learn to make your body walk, and about 2 years to make it talk. And nobody showed you what you do with a leg muscle. You just saw people walking. You're like, I need to do that. But right now, lift your hand for me. Okay? Then put it down. Can any of you tell me how you did that? Okay? You're going to get up after this talk and walk out of here with absolutely no idea how you perambulate your body. No idea. But you've achieved incredible dexterity and skill with it through the relentless application. And I've watched 4 human beings go through this with my own children, where, at the minute, my youngest, she's still at the stage of making a mess of everything. I put food in front of her. She spreads it all over the table. She throws it all over the floor. She's trying to get it in her mouth. But it's all over the place. She doesn't have the dexterity yet. But I know that with my support and giving her the space, she will become skillful with that hand. She'll be able to carry hot drinks, play sport, write, do art. These are incredible feats of dexterity that began with a spasming limb. And all of you were in that boat, and all of you have achieved skill and dexterity, otherwise you wouldn't make it here. Same with your voice, same with your emotions. So when the emotions are birthed forth at puberty, they spasm and lash in the same way as the physical body did. With arousal, self-consciousness, attraction, electromagnetic language, attraction. Okay? But where is the support? Where are the examples? Where is the space to become skillful, to move through the inevitable spasming? It's inevitable. You cannot master your emotions without letting them move, and if you stifle them and suppress them, you will become depressed. You will first of all become repressed, and then you'll become depressed. And this is where men are. Men are in a space where they're addicted. They're discharging all over the place because they've got no space to become skillful. What do we describe the atmosphere at a football stadium? What do we call it? Nope. Electric. The electric atmosphere. Because the men go there to vent the energy they're not allowed to spread anywhere else. It's an electric energy. Porn is there for men to discharge so they don't have to get skillful at wielding that energy. The drugs and the alcohol and the games are there to suppress the charge so they become depressed. 84 men a week are killing themselves in this country. Who knows how many elsewhere? Because they don't have the space to become skillful. Their energy is unwanted, it's unwelcome. And until we start to give the space for an inexpert masculinity and expression of it, we have no chance. None. Because you cannot demand that a baby picks up the milk from birth. So you go back to the example of the bodies again. So the mind is no different. The mind spasms and lashes. Judgments about you, judgments about other people, self-harming thoughts about you, harming thoughts about other people. For most people, meditation is simply a coping strategy for learning to deal with a spasming mind. And so in the mastery work that I teach, it's about learning how to go through the process of becoming dexterous with emotion, body, and mind so that they become a useful tool of expression of your innermost aspirations and desires for the change that you wish for, the changes that you'd like to see. Now, Gender is no different. Sexuality is no different. Sensuality is no different. When it moves, it spasms. It goes wrong. Lots. But I know if your experience was anything like mine, when I got mine wrong, I was met with judgment, derision, scorn, public shaming, embarrassment. That doesn't encourage somebody to try again. It doesn't encourage somebody to seek help in spaces and be honest about their experience. And so who do we turn to offer those spaces? That's where my work is directed at right now. I'm really interested, genuinely interested in supporting spaces, creating spaces where men and boys can go to deal with the charge that's moving through them. Because when I used to think of men's groups, I used to think of people bawling, crying about how badly they've been treated. That's therapy, okay? That has its place. But that's not what I consider men's work. Okay, I call this talk positive masculinity, because when most people think about positive, they think about a happy mood. Positive isn't a happy mood. It's about your ability to take charge despite your mood. Your ability to take charge of your desire to change and to be unstoppable, to be relentless, regardless of the resistance you encounter. Resistance is electromagnetic language. What I work to help is to help you build your capacity, electromagnetic language. Your capacity to take charge is the thing that's required to overcome the resistance out in the world. We have perfect electromagnetic language that denotes what's happening in the gender world, and we just don't even know that's what the subject is. And yet, bizarrely, science will accept that electromagnetism is the thing that governs all relationships out in the cosmos, but all of a sudden it stops when it comes to humans. It doesn't stop. It governs our relationships too. Now, our problem is that we're mammals. That's not a problem, it's a benefit. We're quite cool mammals. But we're mammals, and if you look at the other mammals that we're very similar to, they're very sensually rich with each other. They're deeply sensual. The apes are all lolling about on top of each other, plucking fleas out, and nobody's getting an untoward prod in the back, are they? The lions on the savannah, hanging out after a meal, deeply sensually contacting. But most of us were sensually starved as youths. We were essentially starved, which meant that at the times when we needed to feel safe and supported and upheld, the opposite happened. We were isolated. And what it means is that, or the result of that is that our sensorial framework gets confused later on. We get sensually confused and then sexually confused because we can't pick apart the differences on our spectrum of interaction. I call it the sex slide, where it's like, how long am I allowed to look at you or put my hand on you before you think I have a sexual intent? In fact, in our culture, from about age 2 onwards, people are taught that contact is either sex or violence. That's it. Sex or violence. Keep your hands off each other. It's either sex or violence. Okay, this is a nonsense. And that what this means is that by the time we reach the stage where our emotions are spasming, we're needing contact, we're needing support, we're needing examples of how to express things well. At the moment, right? We're needing sensual. So when that point happens, we get confused about what the messages mean. We can get sexually excited over something that is simply rapport and camaraderie, but because we've never felt it before, we get overexcited. And again, we need huge compassion, huge maturity, huge insight, and huge skill to overcome this, so that we can achieve our potential as mammals and achieve the connections that and the strength that comes from strong mammalian bonds, which are our heritage. It's where we've come from, but we've lost it in the dividing rural world where the men are collared and cuffed, and none of you know about that. It's a huge issue, a huge issue. So when I'm talking about the new masculinity, what I'm referring to is, so at the minute, so I'm going to use anger as an example, okay? So because when we talk about losing our temper, most people only think of anger when they think about losing their temper. But I want you to think about metal now, because that's where the word temper comes from. It's metal work. And when you have temper, when you're achieving temper with metal, what you're doing is hammering on the anvil of life in this instance, but you're hammering on an anvil so that something which was brittle and unreliable becomes a useful edge. It becomes a useful tool. But lost temper applies to all of your feelings, including your sexuality and your sensuality. And that is, if you do not give it the space, and if you end up crippled by it, or it's dominating you, then you've lost your temper. If you're a porn addict, you've lost your temper with your sexuality. Same if you're an alcoholic, you've lost your temper. If you're so overwhelmed by sadness that you can't act, you've lost your temper of sadness. You've forgotten how to turn it into a useful edge, to stay in charge of your purpose and get on with it, because the world is moving fast. And as we have lost our temper with our frustration, our sadness, our outrage, and all the rest of it, we've got no chance. Zero chance. We must be willing to enter into that space, though. Must be willing. So, temper applies to all of these things, including our masculinity. And again, for me, that is the big men's issue, is how do we get past it? But the first thing we've got to do is to heal our wounds of the judgment of the men. Because I don't know about you, but I didn't have very good examples of men in my life growing up. I remember the moment, 10 or 11 years old. I remember the, so my dad ran off with my mum's sister when I was 2. They had kids together, all the rest of it. And people used to go, wow, that's weird. And I was like, well, it was normal for me. As it is when you're a child, it's just normal. But I grew up with loads of anger. I was a true femi man. I was a real feminist. I didn't like men. I grew up in a household full of women, and I saw what men did to women. So I was a proper femi man. I did what so many did of my age and era, which was we used to listen to the girls at the tea break at school as they were filling in the questionnaires in the girls' magazines, about what they wanted and things like that. We'd be like checking the answers to see what it was they wanted. And we molded ourselves into that. We became what I call the Cosmo man. Yeah, I was a proper Cosmo man. I'll tell you what, I don't know of any successful relationships that have resulted from that. We men did what we thought the women wanted. We did what we thought they wanted. They said they wanted it. So we did it. We molded ourselves into that. And they didn't want us. And it was because it was lacking that masculine edge. And then people wonder why women go off with these bad boys. And it's because they want the masculine edge, but they want it tempered. But as they seek to temper the wild man, they break him. And they wonder why he disappears and withdraws. They wonder why they no longer see his fire. And it's like, because it's on the porn and the football and the booze and the drugs and the weed and the whatever and the games console. That's why you've broken the thing you sought to tame. Excuse me. So, one of the problems is, obviously, many of us have this wounded relationship with the men in the past. Bad fathers, absent fathers, whatever. I'll tell you what, I have a great relationship with my dad now. Amazing. It's great. It's really loving. I've thanked him for leaving because he would have done more damage with his bad examples of masculinity than leaving me to it. And I think that's what lies behind a lot of this absent fatherism, because masculinity does need to reinvent itself. And if we keep getting presented with old dysfunctional models of the past, it's never going to fix itself. Because I did what so many men I've seen do, and that is throw the baby out with the bathwater. That was how I became a femi man. I threw the baby out with the bathwater. Do you know that term, that figure of speech? It means you throw out the good and the bad at the same time. That's what I did. Until I realized that that could not work. Toltec gender really helped me. But it could not work. It does not work. It's like trying to say, this arm here, I disown you. Be gone, arm. I'm a new age man. I don't have all that. I don't have anger. I don't have sexual desire. And it's like a limb we pretend we don't have. And we strap it up there so that nobody can see it until the charge builds up in it or somebody pokes it and we have an outburst or a spasm. And they're like, oh, it wasn't me. It was the drink. It was the drugs. It was the this. It was the that. It was their fault. Not realizing that that was the truth of our mastery. That was the truth of where we're at. And that's why I stand here today with no notes, no nothing. I didn't even know how much I was actually going to get to say to you people today, because I work strong. I'm from I believe strongly in the power of the oral tradition. So we've been scratching things on bits of paper for a couple of 100 years, but the power of the oral tradition with timing, intonation, inflection, all of these things can be way more impactful. And if we don't seek to speak from how we feel, with our feelings honed into a useful edge, then all we're doing is talking about stuff. I'm talking about how I feel. Where's your feeling? Where is it? Come on then. You don't look like you're that bothered. Why should I be interested? You don't look that interested. That's what happens when we talk about stuff. So our culture tells us, anger is the most bullied emotion of all. Because when it shows up, people get told, put that away, don't speak to me like that. So the child thinks, I better put that away. But what's interesting is, rather than becoming skillful with anger, people then learn to talk about what they're angry about, but the anger's still there, doing nothing, eating you up, and not bringing any change. But then when you look at us all now, everybody expresses anger in a different way. Some of you go, blah, 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 blah. But others go. Some people will make you a crap cup of tea. Some people won't invite you out next time. Some people will drip feed their anger over weeks and months and years because they do not have the dexterity to say, I'm so angry with you because of this. Can we move on, please? I don't want to carry this anger anymore. And it starts to eat us up and destroy our relationships and delay their progress. It delays them. It delays the change by not developing temper and expressing it. So we need to bypass our judgment, because the interesting thing there is the anger is the same. That's our shared humanity. Anger is anger. How you express it, how it moves through this form is different for all of you, but it's still anger. Same for sexuality, same for sensuality, same for sadness, all the rest of it. Those are our shared humanity. The expressions are different, accepted. So when we are judging the men in our past, see it as a spasm that they got wrong, and they maybe didn't have the support or the examples or the help to get any better at it. I certainly started to see it that way with my parents, and I reckon, I'm pretty sure that my parents did a little bit better than their parents. Just a little bit, and I'm doing just a little bit better than my parents did. It's what I call the family baggage. But even if you can't resolve that within yourselves, I'm going to give you something to finish on, which will help you bypass that, because I want to see if we can connect you with the ancestors of the men here. Because it's something I've discovered in my journeys beyond the edge with men in recent years. And that is what I mean by, and it's where I discovered what I call the bubbling pool of goodwill that is the spirit of man. Okay, the bubbling pool of goodwill that is the spirit of man. Because if you ask natives where the ancestors are, they'll say, they're in the rocks and the trees. And you say that to a Westerner, and they're like, what? What are you on about? So I'm going to show you where our ancestors are now. So, beyond the edge, and my forays beyond the edge, I realized that something happens when we are beyond the edge, when we're tested beyond our traditional safe zones. And that is we go, wow, that was hard. I was tested. That was uncomfortable. Maybe it wasn't that nice. What can I do so that those who come after me can do better, be safer, stay longer, be drier? What can I do? And the men did their job so well that it's invisible to you all now. And so when people are judging, like I said, men are being judged for the deeds of men long dead or distant, as if men's anger capacity and sexual capacity is just their measure. It's not so. So let's look at the saw. So the saw. So what the men did is they codified their wisdom into tools and processes. So if you look at the saw, you can go and spend £9 on a saw in B&Q or somewhere like that. And people think the saw is a designed object. Okay, the saw is not a designed object. It's a refined object. The shape, the materials, the angles, the number of teeth, the shaping of the teeth, the sharpness of the teeth have been cultivated by the efforts of thousands of men working in adverse conditions, going, why is this not cutting? I'm going to have to walk 3 days to get another one. What on earth is going on here? It's taken years to refine the saw. You can consider the saw to be a bit like 1,000 ancestor power. Okay, you've got the power of 1,000 ancestors in your hand that allows anybody, man or woman, to behave and pretend like they're like an expert carpenter because it works. A drill is like 1,000,000 ancestor power. To go and drill 3 mil in concrete, 4 inches, anyone with 50 quid can do that. Anyone, man, woman, child, can do it. Because the men codified their skill and their experience beyond the edge, sitting in the pissing rain and cold, to work these things out, to give it as a gift to all of us. And what they've done is they've codified it into all of the tools and the processes that surround you, so you don't have to worry about it, so you can go further, go deeper, be stronger, last longer, And what are we doing with our gifts? Bickering. But here's the issue, you see, because it's not just tools or shelter or the running tap or the flushing toilet. It's not just those things. It's law and order. It's law and order. So phoning up the police. So you read new laws. New laws are crap. They're poorly thought through. They're awful. You look at old laws, there's real consideration there. And often it's come from people who know that the consequences are somebody dying, screaming horribly, or losing your children, or hearing the wails of your brothers dying and the noise of your women and children being raped or something like that. Law and order and processes have come about from that. And it's been given to you freely. You can call the police up. You can go and take a private prosecution when you don't really need to know any of these things because it was so well codified. So well codified. So we are literally right now wrapped in our ancestors like a garment. Right now, the fact you don't have to worry about the breeze on your face, you can go out there and don't have to smell your own shit. It's going to disappear. You can go and wash your hands if you don't like the smell of them from your lunch. This is a gift. It's been given to you. So what are you doing with the freedom that's been afforded to you so you don't have to worry about that? That's my big question here. But here's the problem. This is the big issue with feminism and with the women's movement is they are wearing those masculine gifts like a robo-suit. Like it's like this robot, so you know, like RoboCop. Yeah? They put on this robo-suit of masculinity. I'll take your tools, I'll take your processes, your safe passage, your roads and your cars, and look at my woman power. Yes, I'm going to take down everything you gave me because I didn't get the Cinderella treatment. Okay? It's literally they're using the gifts of masculinity to wage war on the men. And until it gets highlighted that these, if people who want to smash the patriarchy say, go and sit in a field or a cave then. Forever. Never set foot in your house again. Never use a toilet. Never turn the tap on. Never pick up your phone, which is about 1 billion ancestor power. Never get in your car. That's like about 10 billion ancestor power. Never use the road. Never phone the police. Never phone the state. And I mean it. Never do those things again. Because those are from the sacrifices and the considerations of the men. And they've been given to all of us. So my question to finish is, it's not even a question, it's just saying my offer to finish is, for us men moving forward, what are we going to do with that support? The ancestors there egging us on, saying, look, you don't have to worry about the toilet. Don't worry about the tap. Don't worry about sawing the wood or drilling that. That's all taken care of. What are you going to add so that those who come after you can go even further? Be safer. Go deeper. What are you going to do? Or have you lost your temper? And if you've lost your temper with sadness, depression, addiction, whatever, then get in touch. Get in touch with me and other people who are offering that kind of work. Because when I said I wanted a new year for the masculine, I meant it. It's like saying, no, it's not a lost cause. There is a way out of this. And I've got incredible case studies of people who, whichever change they wanted to make to their sensual skill, their relationship skill, their sexual capacity, their sexual orientation even, anything where people have wanted to make change, the Toltec wisdom, as far as I'm aware, has supported them to do it. And there's amazing successes in recent years. And I'm here to, say that that's available for you too. And if you don't want to, then whatever it is, whatever charge for change is bubbling up in you, then my invitation is, find your temper on it. But the only way you're going to be able to find your temper is by letting it move. Stop talking about it. Start to develop skill at speaking from it. And you can never, ever get any better by just talking about it. You must move when the charge is live. You must speak when it's live. Whether it means your legs shaking, your voice is wobbling, there's tears coming from your eyes, that's the truth. It's the truth of where you're at. That's the truth of your mastery of expression. That is just the truth. So accept it, because you can't start anywhere else. The rest is just a story. It's a fantasy. And if you are interested in helping put spaces on, for boys and men to start to process the past and develop skills for the future, then phone me up. I'll come. You need to invite me because I'm rubbish at marketing, I'm rubbish at advertising, I'm rubbish at all the rest of it. I'm amused by the fact that the guy coming after me is the most quoted masculinity scholar in the UK, and I'm like the least quoted masculinity scholar in the UK. But I really hope there's been some value in the presentation here for you all today, and it's a great honour and a privilege for me to be here, but I'm reclaiming the meaning of the word privilege. I want to thank Mike very much for inviting me when he didn't know that much about me, and I hope there's been some value for you all here. Thank you very much for your time and attention. Enjoy the conference.